Hello and welcome to the Arise interview. 60 minutes of big questions about the big stories from the news and beyond, with fresh insight and critical analysis. I'm Charles Anyegulu. Coming up in the next hour, you may not know this, but the 5 major global beauty pageants, Miss Universe, Miss World, Miss America, Miss USA and Miss Teen USA, have all been won by black women. So why is that? What is changing, and how are beauty pageants evolving in the 21st century? What's happened to the antiquated beauty standards and in many cases outright racism and gender stereotyping of the international beauty pageants? We'll have assessment and analysis in a moment. And later, ever since World Poetry Day was recognized by UNESCO at the turn of the century, poetry, particularly spoken word performance, has become an art from around the world. Nigeria is no exception. Across the country, the poetry scene is awash with innovative and energetic young voices. One such performer is Mariam Bukar Hassan, popularly known as Al-Han Islam, a performance poet that is redefining the literary genre here, encapsulating what it means to be a millennial in Nigeria today. Mariam Bukar Hassan, also known as Al-Hassan Islam, coming up. Now, for the first time, 5 major international beauty pageants, Miss Universe, Miss World, Miss America, Miss USA and Miss Teen USA, have all been won by black women. The milestone was reached in December after Toni Ann Singh of Jamaica was crowned Miss World, marking the first time that black women have simultaneously held the titles of 5 of the world's top beauty pageants. And of course, we know that among them, an African, Zozibini Tunzi of South Africa, was named Miss Universe. Kaylee Garris won Miss Teen USA. Chesley Christ won Miss USA in May, joining Nia Franklin, who was Miss America for 2019. Their victory underscored what has been a watershed year in pageantry, which for decades struggled with racism, segregation and gender stereotyping. We'll discuss all that in a moment. But first, here's a clip of Miss South Africa, Zozibini Tunzi, who won Miss Universe in Atlanta last December.
I grew up in a world where a woman who looks like me, with my kind of skin and my kind of hair, was never considered to be beautiful. And I think that it is time that that stops today. I want children to look at me and see my face, and I want them to see their faces reflected in mine. Thank you.
Miss Zozie there. Well, for more on how beauty pageants are evolving in the 21st century, I'm joined now from our Lagos studio by Arise correspondent Judita Da Silva, who is also an international model, and will be joined a bit later by the actress and women's rights activist Dorothy Njemanze. But let's go straight away to Lagos, and you do rather look like a model, I have to say, Judita. But let's get straight into it. Just going back to Miss Universe Zozie's statement, where I think in the first part she acknowledges that her appearance would not have been recognized as a black woman, was not considered the ideal, whatever that is. I mean, surely that's worth celebrating now.
Absolutely, because I think of all the 5 winners that you've mentioned, hers resonated more, particularly across Africa, and also when you think about Africans in the diaspora. Because when you just think about her aesthetic, she subscribes to what most of us would define over here in Africa as the black look. But in the West, what you find is that when you're biracial, when you're mixed race, that's what they like to cater to the black audience. So they're only going to go so far, as especially when it comes to women. There's only a stretch they will reach to when it comes to catering for representing black people. So Zozibini Tunzi was a watershed moment because, especially because she actually articulated a feeling that all black women have had, but have been almost gaslit into not talking about or discussing or fighting for because you're made to feel you're problematic, is that look of having dark skin, thick, kinky afro hair, and just being the average black woman is now you're at the pinnacle of beauty. Because when you think about it, across all the pageants, the very top one you want is Miss Universe. And right now, Miss Universe is not biracial, she's not mixed race, she's a black woman with afro hair from Africa. That's why it resonated so deeply, because she represents something that, as she said, categorically has never been on the barometer of beauty prior to that moment.
But I mean, listening to all that applause, I mean, we may not have seen it on the screen there, but there certainly was a lot of applause after she won for Miss Zosie clinching the crown for Miss Universe. Would you say that that is positive? Are you convinced that it is?
I think it's kind of like the pendulum swinging. What you always find is there'll be a moment that captures everyone's imagination, but it's what comes after that counts. She has a tenure of 1 year. In that year, she will get endorsements. She will be the face of Miss Universe, and she will get to travel the world as an advocate for what she believes in, what she wants to advocate for, as well as for the brand. And having her as the face of the brand, I think that's partly what drove such vehement applause, because to think that this apex of pageantry is represented by a black African woman, and you know from the way they question them, by all the different categories they go through while they're competing, they're testing you to see who you are holistically, your personality, what you believe in, what you stand for. And she hit the mark every single time. So knowing that the crown lies in the hands of someone who isn't going to falter under the pressure from the West makes everyone feel like, yes, she could, but we have to see her do it over this next year.
But I mean, just looking at someone like yourself, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I mean, you're a model, you've done the sort of the catwalk, but you're also a very intelligent woman who's obviously a correspondent, a journalist, a film producer even. Is there something wrong with the fact that we're celebrating women through their physical appearance and we don't celebrate them on the same scale for leadership, for instance, especially women of color, which doesn't appear to deserve the same kind of reception?
Absolutely. I think that is the most problematic part about things like the pageant world. Because when you think about it, these are all facets of modeling. And in the modeling world, this is what it's kind of almost a hierarchical. There are editorial girls who do the runway, kind of like myself. There are commercial girls who you see in TV adverts, and there are pageant girls. The key about pageant girls is that what it presents itself as being is showing you the totality of a human being. That's why they ask you questions about, you have to have a talent, you have to have something you stand for, a charity you advocate for, as well as the look. It's showing that beauty can be encompassed by a human being of worth and substance. But then when you have things like the swimsuit edition, people kind of say that that's the antithesis of what you're trying to convey. So within this whole spectrum of modeling, it's always about presenting your appearance, but having to live in a world that is driven by aesthetic, that is currency, that's collateral. But having something like Miss Universe, what they're trying to say is beyond the beauty, there is someone of worth behind it. So it's trying to get you to question how you judge women. Africa win. She's showing you the textures of black women that would otherwise go ignored. Because remember that in modeling, it's kind of like it's like a knock-on effect. For instance, they say what we wear on the runway, it goes through different iterations and ends up on the racks of the department store, same as in modeling. Who you have at the apex of every industry, be it the pageant world, the editorial world, or the commercial world, it has a knock-on effect for who brands find attractive, who they invest in, who the idea of the desirable is. So having her at the apex has a knock-on effect to the everyday woman. You may not think it, but it actually does, because it makes people who otherwise might not even give a moment of thought to the beauty of a black woman stop and think, oh, if a black woman is Miss Universe, maybe I should pay more attention. It has a knock-on effect.
So in effect, we're looking at women through the prism of beauty when there are so many other ways that we can celebrate women, of course, beyond their physical appearance. But let me ask you this, Judita, what do you think motivates women to enter beauty pageants? I mean, is it financial? Is it a sort of Instagram fame? Do they want to elevate their prospects?
It's an entire spectrum of things, and it's down to the individual. A lot of women do go into it for money. Like when you look at Miss USA, who was in the army, she did it for the money because she wanted to fund herself going to school. So it depends, again, it depends also your socioeconomic background, because what you find that, a lot of the time is Africans and African Americans tend to go into the pageants because they need money, because they come from a social strata that doesn't give them the kinds of opportunities. But then the other nationalities tend to go into it for clout. And also, it does subscribe to that thing that has defined society and is part of the human condition. Those who have an aesthetic that are appealing have more opportunities in life. It's like your parents telling you that you should be presentable when you go to the interview for work, or you should dress properly when you're in school, or when you become a prefect, you can't afford to have dusty shoes. Your first impressions really do define the way people receive you. And then this is a very heightened, magnified perception of that, where it's the way you look is part of what defines you, because it steers the way people receive you. Unfortunately, we are a superficial and sometimes shallow people in nature. But then when you cater to that and manipulate that negative aspect of human nature, you can steer it towards being something positive, that the way I look will draw you in, but who I am will secure you, which is what I believe they're attempting to do with these kinds of pageants.
But of course, I mean, we've got less than a minute. There are so many different ways of getting fame these days. I mean, through Instagram, you know, or Love Island, or sort of the TV series, or so many other different sort of channels, viral videos, that sort of thing. Why do beauty pageants have such a hold on the public? Briefly, because we've got about 20 seconds.
Because unlike in the modeling industry and editorials, anyone can get in. If you have certain criteria, the appeal is you can get in on who you are as long as you present yourself well, as opposed to being a chosen one, chosen to be a runway model. That's why people love pageants, because it's the idea of the every girl becoming a princess.
Fascinating. Do stay with us, Judita. Would like to talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about why, for the first time ever, the 5 major international beauty pageants have all been won by black women. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, as you've probably heard, the 5 titles of the world's top beauty pageants are currently being held simultaneously by black women: Miss Universe, Miss World, Miss America, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA. Together, their wins appear to show, at least on the face of it, that the competitions have evolved from typically only validating features associated with white women, like lighter skin and straight hair. Campaigners hope that this evolution could help to influence communities globally, including in some parts of Africa, where blackness is rarely held as a standard of beauty. As one lecturer on race, fashion, and gender put it, the fact that 5 of the winners of major beauty pageants are identifiably black does say something about a level of comfort of black skin in the public, particularly in Europe and America. Or does it? Well, we'll speak some more to our 2 analysts in a moment, but first, here's a little snippet from 3 of the current black beauty reigning queens talking about their experiences.
When I was younger, I definitely straighten my hair all the time just because I went to a predominantly all-white school. So that was my normal, seeing girls with straight hair. And so I wanted to fit in as much as possible. But as I grew up, I wanted to stand out more than anything. And so once I finally started growing out my natural hair, I felt happier. I felt like I embraced myself and I became more of me. The biggest piece of advice that I would give to young black girls that feel unseen is you can't be what you can't see, and you have to have the courage in yourself to break bounds for other young girls. You can do it, and you can show other girls that they can do it too.
And those are three women holding three top beauty pageant titles in the United States. With me from our Lagos studio, Arise correspondent Judita Da Silva, who is also an international model. And here in Abuja, the actress and women's rights activist Dorothy Njemanze. Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate having you here. What do you think it is that makes women want to get into beauty pageants? I mean, you were just telling me that you yourself, even though you're a women's rights activist, you took part in a beauty pageant.
Yes, it's different strokes for different folks. For some people, it's some kind of validation, yes, but for some people, it's a career. It's a career path for some people. It's like asking, why do people get involved in footballs, in football competitions? Why do people get involved in basketball? So it's interests which is inspired by different reasons for different people. And so there's no one particular thing, that cuts it. For me, what was it? For me, it was interest. For me, I mean, I love everything around the fashion scene. I just love it. I was happy with my color. I was happy being me. And
well, I suppose it's different because you did it in Nigeria.
Yes, I did it in Nigeria in 2001. Yes, I was first runner-up Miss Imo 2001.
But I mean, did you have to sort of wear a bikini and things and do the sort of catwalks?
I don't have a problem with it, yes. So, like I remind everybody, not everybody is conservative. And there are different kinds of pageants for different people. The men have pageants. It's not only the women that have pageants. These days, the pageants for the men. The last one that interested me so much was Miss Deaf Nigeria. Right. And more people are carving out niches for them to belong to the pageantry world and express themselves, display their beauty, measure themselves by different standards. It's not every pageant that has to primarily do with beauty, so there are different kinds of pageants that exist.
Right. Okay. Well, let me go to Lagos and talk to our Arise correspondent Judita Da Silva there, because according to the statistics, Judita, more women than ever before applied to take part in those 5 main international beauty pageants in 2019. I mean, that in itself is astonishing, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But what you'll see is that when you look at the past black winners of these pageants, there's always been a spike in interest after they won, because the pageant world, like you said in your introduction, has been perceptively racist and ostracized a lot of black women from even thinking they could be considered within the spectrum of beauty being advertised by these pageants. So a win like this lets you know that really anything is possible. Seeing these black women hold every title at the same time really makes people feel like anything is possible, so the interest spikes. And what you're going to see is, naturally, because the expectation for black women is so high, when you get black contestants, what they're going to bring to the table is going to be of such a higher caliber than you're used to. It elevates the expectation and the perception and the reception of pageantry.
That's a very interesting theory. I mean, just explain to us some of the mechanics of this. I mean, what happens when you enter this sort of competition? I mean, is it pretty sort of straightforward, like filling out forms, etc.?
It's actually, there are lots of stages, which is why I kind of doff my hats to pageant girls. They have to go through the application process, which is thousands of people. That is whistled down. Then you're brought into a face-to-face and you go through rigorous interviewing. Then they check your background. Then you go into, it's kind of like a heat process where they're constantly whittling down the number. And over the course of that, you're showing your intelligence, your talent, your articulation, your ability to work well as a team member with others until they get down to the best of the best of the best. best. And it's kind of like almost X factor for beauty and talent. And that's how you end up with the finalists you see in the shows. But they've been at it for months prior to you seeing any of those shows.
Well, let me bring Dorothy Njemanze in, because of course the immediate obstacle for a lot of people is the age restriction. I mean, for these international contests, you can't enter if you're above 25. I mean, that says something, doesn't it? We like them nice and young.
Well, while that exists, there are also pageants for people above those ages.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the ones that are sort of global, the sort of ones we're talking about here, the global
with
sort of
time, maybe there'll be more investment in the other ones, but
right.
with time, maybe there'll be more investment in the other ones. There are pageants for children, there are pageants for different people at different ages. And so if that's the age range for that one, well, that's what it is.
Right. And then when you get into the competition, there are several rounds, aren't
Yes.
there? I think Judita was making that point. I mean, you've got to wear sort of different dresses, etc., and then you have to sort of sashay down this catwalk, don't you?
Yes, you do. There's different kinds of scrutiny that different people go through. And like I always say, I'm particular about the diversity of pageants now. What pageants used to be back then is different from what it is now. Now we have Miss Big and Bold and all sorts of things. So there are different kinds of pageants, but the most popular are the ones you are talking about. And I mean, if people have made it in the local fields back home, they can always aspire to go out there. Abani Darego, inspired me very largely.
That was the Nigerian woman
yes,
who
that won Miss World,
Miss
the
World,
first black
right.
woman to win Miss World, and so she inspired me very much to look into those, to aspire to get to where she was. But come on, advocacy took the better part of me.
Yeah, well, I can tell, because obviously we've talked to you about your advocacy work, which is very respectable and very commendable. But let me go to Lagos and to Judita. Is there a cost here, Judita, of women being objectified? I mean, is that problematic?
Absolutely, and that is in every facet of modeling, because we mentioned the point about when you have a watershed moment, it ricochets and it kind of reverberates through the industry. One thing I can tell you about is, like, even in modeling for my career, when I came in, I was like about the second generation after the supermodel Alec Weck. When Alec Weck, she is credited as redefining beauty, kind of like what Zosie Bini has done. But then what you tend to have is that through the objectification of these kinds of industries, you get into that place which only black women have to deal with, which is fetishization. So I would find a lot of the time, like the girls who were in the wave that I came with, that were from Sudan and Somalia, would say that even though they were booking work, they would just sit in a fitting, and the way designers would talk about them is almost as though they weren't human. It was something otherworldly and something exotic to them, which made them feel so uncomfortable because I'm just a girl in a dress. That's what tends to happen. When the objectification gets to a point where it's in the hands of people that are not used to digesting your kind of beauty, they put you in a pocket that's very almost inhuman. And that can be the negative side of it. So that's why when you've got people like Miss Universe, where you're also a personality as well as a look, you really have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to not enter that pocket and to discuss that kind of issues that other models have.
That's a good point. And Dorothy, quite a lot of people tend to be in the audience when these sort of pageants take place. Some women have said that it feels as if the men there are ogling them and judging them walking up and down the catwalk on their physical appearance. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Did you get that feeling that, you were sort of being looked at, scrutinized, walking up and down the stage, men sort of nod, wink, wink, sort of at you?
Well, it's not only men that nod, wink, wink, women nod, wink, wink. Everybody is there to look, everybody is there to judge, everybody is there to admit that the person who emerged winner is the person who should have emerged winner. So how would it happen if they are not looking? So The different activities that happen prior to these pageants pretty much prepare you for that kind of exposure in different ways. Whatever the kind of pageantry it is that you're going in for, you're taught how to speak, you're taught how to deal with the crowds, you're taught how to deal with different things, you know, and how to manage yourself. And so it's not as if people are just brought out from wherever and pushed out to the stage. No, there's a lot of preparation and there's a lot of conscious effort that goes into making sure that it's the best that comes in. Remember also that a lot of these are for profit making businesses. And so they need to put their best foot forward so that the next time they make an advertisement, they put out an advertisement, you know, they get some patronage.
We're almost out of time, Judita. I mean, do you think people's views, particularly women's views of beauty pageants, are changing?
I wouldn't say we've gotten that far yet. I think it's got to be a level of respect. I think it's really important that someone like Zosie Bini and these 5 black women are taking the lead right now. But it's still a way to go before women feel, especially now in the era of Me Too and feminism, the idea that you're using your looks to get ahead is never going to sit quite right. But if they can advocate for their causes and their intelligence, it's always a move in the right direction.
Judita da Silva in Lagos and Dorothy Njamanza here in Abuja. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including the female performance poet, Mariam Bukar Hassan, popularly known as Al Hassan Islam, who is redefining the literary African genre. Stay with us.